number 3. Ready, set, go!
2 have booked their tickets to Shanghai, China. 2 still remain. Let's go ahead and get ready for quarterfinal number 3 with Frodan and Brian Kibler. We have Ant versus Astrogation, 2 members of the Southern California competitive Hearthstone scene and 2 friends and practice partners. A little unfortunate, but at the same time, something like this is kind of a repeated story that we see a lot of times in the Championship Tour playoffs.
Yeah, it's bound to happen when you have groups of players who know each other from the same region, who are all highly competitive and have sort of been at the cusp of success before. That's kind of the story with both these players as well. Ant's a player who actually was in the top 16 of the Americas Championship all the way back in 2014. Nearly made his way to BlizzCon then. Astrogation is a player who's had a lot of near misses as well at big events. Incidentally, he actually was a player who qualified for the Esports Arena opening tournament, the grand opening tournament and had a very good showing there. I've actually had a chance to know him for quite a while, so really good guy, and here representing his new team, Splice, even dyed his hair to their colors.
Yeah, that's right, which, of course, I'm all in favor for. Taking a look at their deck list lineups, they have very similar strategies of playing aggressive decks. The one difference is the Evolved Shaman versus the Pirate Warrior. Now, this is something that really surprised me. Going into when I was doing some of my preparation notes, I thought Evolved Shaman would have been a must-ban on Ant's side, primarily because Evolved Shaman is this new deck, so it's a little bit untested, but all the percentages seem to indicate that it's favored against almost every one of Ant's decks here, but instead he's choosing to ban Aggro Druid, which is a go-to for many aggro mirrors. Why do you think that is here, Brian?
It's possible that his choice to ban the Aggro Druid is out of respect for the threat of the Hungry Crabs. He's actually playing, the very Murloc-heavy Paladin himself. He may think that that's like a more polarized match. But he also may think that while that may be mathematically the best matchup against each of his decks in aggregate, that he has one deck that he's trying to push through, and he's looking to ban the Aggro Druid to get that out of the way.
Okay, well, let's see what happens in game number 1. Let's take a look a little bit closer to that Evolved Shaman that has been all over the board for the playoffs, but it's gotten Astrogation this far. Ant's going to lean towards Pirate Warrior, which is going to struggle a little bit in a lot of matches. But at the same time, when we say struggle, we're talking about the percentages are just slightly unfavored, maybe 45 to 47%. So Astrogation still has to be very mindful of his plays, can't just really autopilot here.
Yeah, and one of the things that can really impact the percentages in this matchup, drawing Patches. Astrogation with that in his opening hand. Not only is Patches a card that you definitely want to bring off of your Blood Cell Corsairs, but if that was a Blood Cell Corsair, it could also potentially remove one of Ant's early game weapons. And Ant's draw here doesn't actually have any weapons. It's actually pretty clunky on his side.
Yeah, that's right. Just kind of debating if he wants to even play anything on this first turn here, because it can be problematic if their opponent summons Patches. But at the same time, too, your opponent passed turn 1, so it's not like he has commanding board position either, and that must make Astrogation feel a little bit better, too. Maybe he can take it slow.
Yeah, you definitely would rather not see, say, Nadzal's first mate come out in the first turn. And this is a matchup which can often come down to very, very close calls in terms of the board presence. It's really about who's able to establish and preserve a board. Both of these decks have ways to leverage it, whether it's by playing multiple pirates and getting a Southsea Captain from the Pirate Warrior deck, or from cards like the Flametongue Totem that we see in Astrogation's hand. Not to mention Bloodlust. If he's actually able to build a big turn, Bloodlust can be huge.
Yep, so by keeping Patches in the hand and he has Flametongue Totem, that keeps flexibility for better trades as opposed to just letting Patches get sniped by the opponent Patches. And Astrogation does have to take a little bit of damage, though. That's kind of the downside of his play, but hopefully it's not going to be that big of a deal for him moving forward. He does have that Jade Clause, which is what he was originally crutching to as an opportunity to utilize the coin this turn. But now that he has Maelstrom Portal, perhaps he feels like he can set up a better board state for that, because his opponent doesn't have a weapon. Going into turn 3, the #1 thing you're concerned about is a Blood Cultist, usually in Pirate Warrior matchups, but maybe that's not really the case anymore.
Yeah, there's Blood Cell Cultist and the threat of Southsea Captain. Ooh, a Mana Worm is actually a really impactful minion to come off of that Maelstrom Portal. And Astrogation may even be debating using his coin here. It's the only real thing that he can potentially do is coin out Patches. It seems super weak, so I don't know that that's really necessarily a legitimate concern of his. But now that Raider is softened up so that Astrogation can potentially kill it, either with just the coin allowing him to buff up that Mana Worm the following turn, or with potentially the Patches or the Jade Claws, or even just the Flametongue Totem as well.
Yeah, a lot of flexibility for him. So now over to Ant's hand here, which we haven't talked too much about. One of the things that's been really awkward for him is no weapons to really make a lot of his hands run smoothly. Things like Dread Corsair, heavily overcosted at 4, but when you start having Fiery War Axe and other weapons to kind of help aid that situation, it ends up giving you really powerful tempo swings. Ants instead is just going to remove that Mana Worm, which came off the Maelstrom portal, in order to get some board control.
And he's going to go ahead and expend the Heroic Strike here to try and contain the board. Does not have a weapon, so there's no charge on the deckhand. Now this is potentially a great opportunity for Astrogation. He has Jade Claws and Patches. He could use this turn to remove both minions from Ant's board, as well as develop board presence for himself. You know, the sort of biggest threat from Ant next turn would be perhaps a Crocron to push in damage, and if he did have a Jade Golem on the board on his turn, the Ant would either be forced to attack into the Jade Golem by itself, or the Flame Tongue Totem would represent the ability to clear it.
And take a look at Ant's road to where the top 8 has landed him. He went through so many strong players and championship finalists in WTY Bill, Monsanto, Sidonia, and of course Racy, VLPS, also really strong players in their own right too. So definitely no slouch, and right now things are looking a little shaky for him going to turn 4, but he still has some pretty strong minions. Things like Frothing Berserker aren't, at least on the board, easily dealt with immediately.
Yeah, Frothing Berserker is generally at its best when you have the board already. You know, again, this is so much about the ability to snowball an advantage. Frothing Berserker here, yes, it at least doesn't die to the board as Ant sees it, but you know, Astrogation has that Flame Tongue Totem, which can take down the Berserker, and with the Primal Fin he just drew, you could potentially even just play Flame Tongue, coin out Primal Fin, and really get things rolling for fuel for the Flame Tongue.
Absolutely, and kind of put like a huge, I mean, Flame Tongue already has a huge target on its head to be killed off immediately, but even more so now because Primal Fin Totems generate all these free tokens for Astrogation to use moving forward. Good sequencing too to avoid taking excessive damage by attacking first with the weapon. And now Ant really needs a weapon. I think this is one of the last few turns he can afford to, otherwise he's just too far behind. Picks up Leroy Jenkins, which, you know, obviously on turn 5, that's probably the most expensive card you can play, but right now that is just useless to him.
Yeah, Ant really needed to find something to give him the ability to take back tempo on this board. Specifically, you know, that Flame Tongue is going to just be an absolute nightmare. He can play a 4-drop minion here with one of the Dread Corsairs, but just the Murloc that came off the Primal Fin Totem can kill it thanks to the Flame Tongue. And then Astrogation is going to be setting up more. He has a Stonehill Defender. He can Stonehill and use his hero power next turn and really just, you know, continue to run away with this board.
Yeah. Is it really Dread Corsairs his best play? It could be that he's saving it for better tempo swings if he picks up a strong weapon, but I think that's
Leroy on Flame Tongue may be the best play. Like you can't allow the Flame Tongue Totem to just keep giving value, and you know this hurts so badly because you're giving a token deck 2 minions, and well, there's another Bloodlust. If Astrogation wanted to, he could just Bloodlust here, attack for a ton of damage with the minions that, you know, don't trade into to the Leroy, and clear the board.
I think it's too appetizing to set the Mantide Totem. Your opponent's already revealed that his hand's extremely awkward. Has to be holding some really bad pieces. Even if your opponent had upgrade, you'd probably play stuff like that. So you have to imagine that you can put your opponent on maybe a no-weapon Corsair hand, or other things like it that Ant can't use, a Mortal Strike perhaps, which he probably would have used as well.
But this is exactly the sort of board that Pirate Warrior is bad at dealing with. They can often punch through an individual large threat with Heroic Strike, a big weapon swing, but a bunch of small things are very frequently very difficult for the Pirate Warrior to deal with. And you know, Astrogation's showing no signs of letting up. He doesn't have that Flame Tongue anymore, so there's not the same threat of each of these small minions just continuing to get powerful value trades, but now he can just do the same thing with Bloodlust and push a bunch of damage.
Yeah, the Bloodlust is a little bit awkward in terms of like you're not setting up any further board, but that's where Primal Fin Totem really comes into play here. You know, Primal Fin Totem allows you to still have a little bit of board development, and he's still drawing cards, just really powerful because he's going to be able to find game-ending damage inevitably by building board, having a good amount of hand resources, and have that second Bloodlust ready to go.
And really, you know, Astrogation is at 23, Ant is at 19. Astrogation's the only one on the board. This is actually a pretty good draw. The N'Zoth's First Mate allows him to at least whittle down the board of Murlocs and actually, incidentally, get out both of the Dread Corsairs here, but Astrogation still has a Devolve if he wants, another Bloodlust that can allow him to use this board to trade into everything Ant has.
Yeah, Devolve is actually a little funny here because it's usually to help him get past certain taunts here in very slower matchups, but in aggressive matchups, you want to have to use Devolve if your opponent built up a really powerful board. But Dread Corsair costs 4, so you're actually not really taking too much stats off the board by devolving the 3/3 taunt in a Dread Corsair.
I mean, at this point, Astrogation can really just take it super slow. Ant's totally out of cards in hand. If he does choose to Bloodlust, trade in 2 of his totems and take a value trade on the N'Zoth's First Mate with the other one, he can still just set up a thing from below. And he has the board absolutely dominated, a huge hand of cards, and Ant has nothing.
Yeah, if he keeps his Mana Totem life, he can draw more cards. If he wants to keep the Primal Fin, he can have more board as well. So he's got a lot of options at his disposal. And it looks like Ant's gonna really need some big powerhouse cards to really pull him back. And it needs to be back-to-back. It needs to be Arcanite Reaper, upgrades, and things along that line. He can no longer win through any kind of board control.
And here's interesting, Astrogation chose to play the Primal Fin rather than play Thing from Below. This leaves him open to, for instance, the Korkan Elite off the top of his deck to kill one of his totems here. Perhaps he wants to wait and play Thing from Below to play multiple big things in a turn to prevent, say, an Arcanite Reaper from really getting a ton of value here, though this does open him up to this particular value trade from Ant.
Yeah, in anticipation for the Thing from Below, we thought that maybe Ant couldn't fight for the board, but because Astro left himself open to that Charger, that ends up being the case. Although it still looks like it's getting pretty bad here.
This is really, yes, Ant was able to get a reasonable trade here, but look at the hands. Ant has nothing. Astrogation has kind of an embarrassment of riches. You can almost play cards randomly at this point and still end up getting out ahead in this situation.
Yeah, and things like, Portal, even like the Devolve, and all these really cheap, small things with Flame Tongue Totem is what really makes the Evolved Shaman pretty strong against the Pirate Warrior. Astrogation looking for Stonehill Defender to potentially pick him up another powerful taunt. White Eyes is really strong. Sets up the Thing from Below. Can't really imagine Ant's gonna stay too much longer into this game because he knows that he is pretty much on thin ice at this point.
It finds a Bloodsuck Corsair, and he's gonna get himself a 3/4, but that's not gonna stand up to the board that Astrogation has. If Astrogation were perhaps at a bit lower life, and there were outs of Spellbreaker, a Mortal Strike to actually take him down, I think that Ant might have a chance here, but Astrogation is just absolutely running away with it.
Yep, very nice, easy value trade up here from Astrogation, and able to kind of push damage and set up lethal potentially if he just plays the White Eyes. And that should do it. I don't think there's any individual card Ant can really draw and string into to come back into this game, and the very aggressive Pirate Warrior strategy has largely faltered in combination of how strong Shaman is able to weather the storm, but also because Ant just really didn't have that weapon draw. Look, he finally got a Fiery War Axe, but it's way too late.
Yeah, he really needed to have the ability to interact with the board earlier. In particular, the fact that he drew no weapon and drew both Dread Corsairs was especially bad for him because he had a number of overcosted cards in addition to not having that value plus tempo that your weapons give you interacting in the early board.
Now, granted, we kind of expected that Shaman would get a win somehow this series, so it's not really that big of a surprise that Astrogation starts off 1-0 by queuing up the Evolved Shaman first. But now we start entering where it's a little bit more familiar on both sides here, because remember, Ant has Murloc Paladin, Secret Mage, and Pirate Warrior. Astrogation has the same, except instead of Pirate Warrior, he has Evolved Shaman. So he also has a Secret Mage. He also has a Murloc Paladin. And one thing that's really funny that stands out to me on both guys' ends is that they're both playing a Secret Mage that has Yogg-Saron in it.
They are.
So I'm really looking forward to see if those Secret Mages can grab wins, and particularly if Yogg-Saron can make a big impact, because he hasn't really all playoffs long, and we've seen him a couple times so far.
Yeah, their Secret Mage lists are not quite identical. They're structurally super similar. The big difference is that Astrogation is playing a Spellbender and a Tar Creeper, where Ant has just the double counterspell, double mirror entity for his full secret package.
Well, let's go into game number 2 here. We have Pirate Warrior up against Murloc Paladin. Now, this Murloc Paladin is largely considered to be fairly aggressive, although it does tend to curve out into the mid-range aspects of the Paladin. So it has a Sunkeeper Terram, it has the Curator, it has Tyrian Forward Ring. So it still has a lot of late-game potency. And with a draw like this, having Murloc Tidecaller and Hydrologist, outside of having the Rock Pool Hunter or maybe even the War Leader itself, is pretty much all you can ask for if you're the Paladin.
And this is actually a card that I was going to comment on, the Rallying Blade in Astrogation's deck. This is a card that I've played in a lot of decks, and people have been like, why are you playing Rallying Blade? You don't have any Divine Shield minions in your deck. And the answer is, well, it's a 3-attack weapon for 3, where your next best option is True Silver Champion, which is a 4-attack weapon for 4. If you're looking to fight for the early game and protect your 1- and 2-drop minions, you can do that much more powerfully with Rallying Blade than you can with True Silver Champion. There's a lot of minions that are 3/3s that are powerful in the early game that you want to be able to remove from the board. And now, speaking of removing minions from the board, here's the strictly better Rallying Blade in this matchup where there are not Divine Shield minions with the War Axe that Ant really wanted in the last game.
There are a couple ways for Rallying Blade to get additional Battle Cry value. There's Tyrion Forward Ring. There's also Gentle Megasaur giving Divine Shield to all the Warlocks. I have seen that before. It is extremely scary. Made me reevaluate a lot of my life choices at that point. Valve Inquisitor, also a really important thing that it was able to get to that 4 health, so that way it can help trade into some of these smaller minions. But we'll see how Ant's hand shapes up here. He picks up the N'Zoth's First Mate. A little bit awkward.
He is going to be able to use the patches plus the weapon here to take down that Inquisitor and set up the N'Zoth's First Mate, get himself a Rusty Hook.
Yeah.
But this is an opportunity for Astrogation because he has Rallying Blade to actually punch through the Dread Corsair here.
There you go.
And I would not be surprised to actually see him trade off the Grimscale Chum for the N'Zoth's First Mate, in part because the Chum would just die to the Rusty Hook anyway, but also to neutralize the threat of the Bloodcell Cultist that Ant could possibly play the next turn.
Yeah. And you can see the impact that Grimscale Chum giving the +1/+1 onto the Valve Inquisitor ended up allowing him to have a squeaky clean board, so things like the South Sea Captain and the Cultist have minimal value. And also, the development of the weapon has proved to be a little annoying for Ant, because otherwise playing South Sea Captain for tempo would be that worrisome. But there's a Rallying Blade waiting on the other side.
Yeah, often you'd love to get your captain down and then use the captain to activate the cultist. But here, Ant is forced to play the cultist just as a 3/4 body because it doesn't actually die to a swing from the Rallying Blade. Astrogation can potentially trade in the Bluegill Warrior plus a weapon hit if he wants to here. The Bluegill Warrior is potentially more valuable, though, given the fact that he just picked up a War Leader, so he has more options with that in the next turn.
Yeah, that's right. And also because of the hidden threat of a hero power. You always think those Silverhand Murlocs are not going to be anything special, and all of a sudden a War Leader drops and they turn into 3/2s. Very scary proposition. So, initially I'm leaning towards a Hydrologist first to see what secret that you get, and then hero power. I don't know if any secret would change Astrogation's play, though, off the top of my head.
Noble Sacrifice is very often pretty powerful in this matchup because there are a lot of big swings that come later in the game, whether they're from Krorkon Elites, Leroy, Arcanite Reaper. It's a little weaker right now because of the presence of Rusty Hook on Ant's side, but is the choice for Astrogation regardless. And he is going to go ahead and just clear this board out.
Interesting. Well, he really wants the Hydrologist to survive, primarily because the Rusty Hook still exists on his opponent's side. This is what Astrogation was really weighing, because if the one was created through the hero power, then it would be killed to the weapon.
Right. Yeah, that would have given Ant a clean trade on both his minions. He could have easily killed the Silverhand Murloc? I think that's what they're called, as well as the Hydrologist with his weapon plus the Cultist on the board.
That's right. And then the Pirate also survived, so there's actually 3 reasons why. So. Good spot there by Astrogation to really make sure that he's very diligent in sweeping the board up here from Ant.
Now Ant has quite a few options here, though none of them are super clean in terms of how he'd love to use his mana. War Axe is at least somewhat appealing because he can take out the Hydrologist on the board, prevent it from potentially getting buffed up by a War Leader. One of the really scary things in this matchup, though, is the Spike Ridge Steed. Spike Ridge Steed is a card that you really need to be very aware of going into your opponent's later turns, and Ant is going to potentially wait and play his War Axe plus the Frothing next turn, so he can clean up a minion as well as try and ensure there's nothing there for the Steed. Ooh, but Blessing of Kings. That's a very good draw from Astrogation because he can, rather than just going in on a War Leader, which could potentially get traded into, has at least the option of just making a big minion to get some value here. This does let him just get a trade with the Hydrologist, though.
Yeah, it's more mana efficient given that he can create this little small token and neither just dies to the weapon.
He's also seen a War Axe already, so he thinks that the chances that there is an additional War Axe to come down and kill his War Leader is lower, but there is that second War Axe, so Ant able to take down the War Leader, but only after he was able to get a valuable buff to kill his minion. And Tyrion drawn for Astrogation, that's huge. Blessing of Kings is enough, though, to still take down the Frothing Berserker and, continuing to have the March of the Murlocs here.
Well, Ant actually has a Spellbreaker conveniently for that. I don't know if he wants to use that immediately because Spellbreaker is very useful against one of the things that you're talking about, which is the Spikered Steed. And also, Ant has to also first worry about what is that secret? What is that secret that's really powerful too? Do I have any read or tells from what my opponent was doing previously?
I mean, I think just based on what you have seen, it makes sense that it's Noble Sacrifice. You wouldn't play Redemption on a Recruit here. You wouldn't play Getaway Kodo on the Recruit. It's pretty clearly going to be a Noble Sacrifice, which thanks to the Charge Minion in the Korokon Elite, Ant does have an answer to. And now, a little bit of a less powerful turn from Astrogation as he's waiting to play that Tyrion, which Ant has the answer for in Spellbreaker.
That's right. Well, this turn he's going to play that Murloc War Leader, which makes his entire board vulnerable. And it's funny because Ant's been the one trying to aggress onto Astrogation, but he's the one who's using his entire life total, so he's been pushing a lot of damage. Ooh, Ant picks up the Grinding Gadgeteer.
All right, well, Gadgeteer, we talked about this when we saw Ant on camera yesterday against Racy. A really interesting inclusion in his deck that helps in terms of these kind of mid-rangey aggro-type matchups where just if your opponent doesn't remove it immediately, it's super powerful. Even if they do remove it immediately, you do get a buff that can oftentimes get your minions out of range of your opponent's strongest removal. And yeah, he's going to get a buff on his Spellbreaker, push some damage, and now he's going to be able to play not just a 4/3, but an even bigger minion that's going to take down Tyrion's Divine Shield and Taunt as well.
Yeah, and that just makes Tyrion a 6/6, which is rather unimpressive for something for 8 mana, especially since it lost its Taunt. So Astrogation's going to be pretty upset about that. Takes a deep breath because he realizes that he's kind of in trouble, but if he picks up a Spikered Steed, he can kind of climb back immediately or some kind of taunt.
But he needs it right now. Ant has lethal damage with that Arcanite Reaper, other than the fact that there's obviously a trade available to Tyrion here. So you don't really want to just be trading Tyrion for your opponent's Spellbreaker, but that looks like what Astrogation may need to do. The Megasaur's interesting. He could potentially try and get Taunt on 1/1, which incidentally is not that bad considering it lines up pretty well against the fact that your opponent only has individual large sources of damage.
He could also try to do it over 2 turns, because, I mean, he's at 14, and his opponent has 1 card in hand, so maybe if he wants to gamble, he can Hero Power first, and then try to get 2 Megasaur ticks of the Adapt, which might give him an additional chance for a Taunt. And if you can have Blessing of Kings on one of those tokens, it gives him additional Taunt, because right now Tyrion is just nothing more than cleaning up some of the board.
Yeah, there's also, he can Tyrion and value trade into the Grimy Gadgeteer. He knows that card in hand is not a minion, though, because there was not a Gadgeteer activation on it, so he knows that's a spell or weapon. That's not a particularly good result from the Adapt. He's able to get +3 health, which is not really what you're looking for. Looks like, yeah, he's going to go ahead and take the full trade rather than try and take any value, just to get the most damage off the board here. Ooh, Heroic Strike. All right, well, is that just lethal right now? No, he's 1 off.
13.
1 off lethal right now, but he's just going to push it all to the face.
Yeah.
And he knows that, okay, you have to have exactly, I think it's just a Curator or a Spikered Steed. No, there's a Wicked Flame Burn Bristle in the deck as well.
Second Megasaur?
That's
that's not going to be enough. You can't stop too much damage here. And Astrogation was looking for that Megasaur to adapt him into the situation to get Taunt or some way to stabilize. But it turns out, can't be targeted by spells is not that good of an adapt here.
not in that one. Not in that
pretty
one.
bad, actually, in this spot.
But yeah, Astrogation really needed to taunt this turn, and he's kind of walking through things, seeing if there's anything he can do, but that is just a Arcanite Reaper waiting to take away your last life point. Not going to work.
Yeah. Now, I mean, Astrogation will just go ahead and think about his next deck or what he wants to do for the rest of the series. But Ant gets a much-needed victory here as Pirate Warrior was looking to struggle a little bit in the series, at least. I thought that was one of the decks that might be the area of concern, but Ant seems to have weathered the storm here.
Yeah, and you saw the sigh of relief on his face. That was definitely a very, very back and forth game. Astrogation had a lot of powerful tools, and critically, the Spellbreaker came up huge.
Yeah.
It's a card that we've seen included in a lot of Pirate Warrior decks. Helps deal with the taunt minions that are the way that many decks try to deal with it. And clearly, there, if he wasn't able to dispel the Tyrion, silence the Tyrion, he was just not going to be able to get through it.
Yeah, that was a really big critical inclusion into the deck, which, I have to admit, I was a little confused at first. He has so many 4-mana cards in general in that Pirate Warrior. He's got a Grimy Gadgeteer, he's got the Core Card Elites, he's got Mortal Strike for direct damage, he's got Naga Corsair to upgrade his weapon, he has a Spellbreaker in there. So it's just pretty much, the Expendables 4-mana edition in the Pirate Warrior. Just a crazy amount of action superstars all packed into one deck and awkwardly kind of making it work. But that's kind of what the tournament decks are for, right? You're supposed to tech it specifically. That's why you see Hungry Crabs, you see the Gluttonous Oozes, and in this case, that was the Spellbreaker for Ant of the series so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Astrogation still has that Paladin deck, going to have to find a way to get it through, and that's what he's going to try to do right now. Ant on his Secret Mage.
Yeah, so another thing that's a little bit confusing to me, too, partially in regard to what we were talking about at the very beginning, is that Secret Mage did have a good matchup, at least on paper. I'm talking about statistics based off spreadsheets, off of popular expert opinion from meta snapshots and whatnot. But Secret Mage does have an advantage over Aggro Druid, but everything else in Astrogation's lineup, it tends to either be 50-50 like the Mirror, or struggle against. Murloc Paladin tends to get really ahead onto the board. Mirror Entity is actually kind of useless against a lot of those early game plays that they have available to them. So I'm really curious if Ant has another backup plan here that we're not expecting.
Well, one of the ways you can get ahead on the board is Mana Worm, and Ant does have that to get some damage in here, but Astrogation critically has that Rallying Blade. He can potentially just coin out Rallying Blade, take out the Mana Worm if he wants here.
Yeah, you also can go for a double 1-drop, save that coin for inevitably ruining counter spell, but I think that's a little bit better just to get the weapon out so that way you can proactively develop and not worry about some of your minions being removed by that Mana Worm.
Yeah, the Mana Worm, the fact that it can just attack and ping into something where you play a spell and get a value trade on the Tidecaller there, it could have gone very poorly for Astrogation, so it decides to just take it out immediately. And now Astrogation's hand is starting to get pretty explosive. He can potentially play the Chum here and even follow that up with Tidecaller plus Seer the following turn.
Yeah, it's an interesting theoretical. People debate a lot about Chum and Tidecaller
right,
sequencing.
Yeah, exactly how you want to use it.
You generally want a Tidecaller first because the Chum, assuming you have another Murloc, will always guarantee you a +1/+1.
Sure.
So you just lose out on a stat point, which is what people usually argue. Of course, if you care about immediate tempo onto the board, by all means, go for the Chum. Now, Ant picks up the Arcanologist, really powerful card here. Or sorry, not here, but really powerful card in the deck, primarily because he has things like the Cabal Crystal Runner, which is going to be one of the most important swing turns. One of the ways Secret Mage can win a lot of the matchups, even if it's unfavored, is by flooding the board with ridiculously powerful tempo, like Firelance Portal, Cabal Crystal Runner, and it just removes, develops 2 really meaty minions, and you can't really come back. And look how comfortable Ant is. He's actually just taking it slow. This is a really good adaptation and recognition of what the matchup's about.
Well, one big threat from this turn from Astrogation is just Blessing of Kings. If Ant had tried to develop an Arcanologist there, he could have just had Blessing of Kings on a Silverhand Recruit, weapon takes down the Arcanologist, and suddenly he's pretty far behind. Now he's still pretty far behind because Astrogation had the strong curve of Chum into Seer here, but Ant was playing around the sort of power turn that he would have faced otherwise too.
Absolutely, and you can't really blame Ant because there's a lot of ways that Murlocs can stack onto other Murlocs. We're talking about Gentle Megasaur, we're talking about Murloc War Leader. So Ant is saying, I have a little bit of a slower hand, so I'm just going to play the removal game. But now he can't really necessarily afford to do that without getting pretty fortunate off of his primordial glyphs. So let's go ahead and see behind door number 1 here.
Not so exciting. Counterspell, Geyser, and Forbidden Flame. Counterspell can protect you from a Blessing of Kings or a Spike Ridge. See, there actually are only really, barring Hydrologist Secrets, pretty expensive high-impact spells in the Paladin deck. And this does also happen to set up his Crystal Runners. So, that can definitely put a little bit of a kink in Astrogation's plan here. Because now, this even if Astrogation wanted to go with Blessing of Kings here, he knows that's actually a primordial glyph secret. So it could even be Spellbender. You know, he knows that there's Counterspell and Mirror Entity in Ant's deck. But if you actually cast a Blessing of Kings into a potential Spellbender, that could just absolutely lose you the game in the spot. So I think Astrogation is going to be, very, very careful about playing spells at this point. And that's a significant number of the powerful cards in his hand.
Yeah, and almost every single instance of that, the Spellbender or Counterspell, makes you want to play Rockpool Hunter instead, so that way you can kind of have a better board. And also, if it's Mirror Entity, you have immediate weapon kill on the 2/3, and you can start pushing damage. Seems to be a nice compromise there, so Astrogation choosing to go for the Rockpool Hunter. And sees that there's no Mirror Entity, so he's going to already be on alert. And attack to the face also means that it is not Vaporize or Ice Barrier. And it's also not Potion of Polymorph. So there's a lot of options that have been stricken off the possibility board. It could be Ice Block, could be Counterspell, could be Spellbender.
Yeah, and Spellbender is clearly the absolutely terrifying one. Counterspell, yes, they stop your spell, but if you look at the spells that Astrogation actually has, Blessing of Kings, Spike-Rich Steed, these are both spells that if your opponent steals them can absolutely swing the game around.
Yeah.
So glyph number 2 for Ant. All right, well, he does have an Ice Block as an opportunity. He could actually play Ice Block, Mirror Entity, and both Cabal Crystal Runners this turn.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what he's looking for here, because that also sets up for him to soften up his opponent's board, so maybe Firelance Portal can come out, because he can't really afford to take another round of damage from his opponent's side. Plus, he has 3 secrets, which is going to really complicate Astrogation's turn, and Astrogation has all expensive stuff. There's no way for him to play around all 3 of these very safely. He's going to have to make a bet somewhere.
Oh, but Sunkeeper Tarim, the draw for Astrogation. Suddenly these 5/5s, which are looking like such a incredible tempo swing, aren't nearly as powerful. It does, you're pretty certain that there's a Mirror Entity here, or rather you strongly suspect that there is. And so I think we're going to see some attacks first, followed up by the Sunkeeper Tarim, if that is what Astrogation chooses to play this turn.
So again, no Vaporize, no Ice Barrier. Still has to test for that 1 mana secret, because we know it's Ice Block, but it could be Potion of Polymorph. It could be, Mirror Entity and Counterspell. The combinations of it are actually very high. Yeah. So Astrogation has to sequence everything optimally here.
Yeah, the fact that there are 2 secrets that did not come from Ant's deck is crucial here, because Ant knows there's exactly Counterspell and the Mirror Entity in the deck. So one of those is either Mirror Entity or Counterspell. The others could be anything. He did test for some things, and yes, now he's going to get the news that that's a actual Mirror Entity from his deck.
And he played around it by attacking first into the Crystal Runner to avoid the taunt from Terran's body to stop these 3/3s from attacking into it. Astrogation's playing very well right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The Firelance Portal is a very attractive option here, going to allow Ant to punch through the Terran on the other side of the board. Ooh, gets himself a Bitter Tide.
Wow.
That is a very large minion.
It's as big as they come.
It could have been, off the Firelance Portal, sure, but there are definitely bigger minions.
I mean, yes.
But the Hydrologist is a very good draw for Astrogation, though. That gives him something that can allow him to test for Counterspell.
Yes.
Which, he can potentially play the Hydrologist and a secret and something else. But the problem is time. With that Bittertide Hydra, he's now under a ton of pressure.
That's right. But assuming that it is Counterspell and this secret gets completely wasted, then Astrogation will be free up to potentially play Blessing of Kings, except he still doesn't know if it's Spellbender.
Right,
this is a risk.
This could still be Spellbender, exactly. There is the one spell that he has not played into yet, but he gets the good news. Okay, it was just Counterspell. I can at least play this.
And it's one of those things where, as the Paladin player, you say, okay, if you got Counterspell and Spellbender, you got me, but I need to make this Blessing of Kings push. And gets a Firelance Portal off the Babbling Book. Pavel, is that you?
And not quite as impressive a minion off of it, but that alone, the spell alone, was incredibly strong. Spike-Rich Steed is now available to Astrogation. He knows that there's no Counterspell or Spellbender up at this point. But is it enough now that he's had this huge tempo swing of the Firelance Portal the previous turn?
Oh man, well, Astrogation is pretty much all but confirmed it's Ice Block. He's attacked into the face, he's summoned minions. Actually, I don't know if he's tested Mirror Entity. He did by Hydrologist. So he's tested pretty much every possible other secret, so he knows it's Ice Block. And now he needs to just survive against this Bittertide Hydra.
Not an easy task. Bitter Dead Hydra hits hard.
Not easy at all, considering that just a Spike Prestige means that the Bitter Tide gets an easy trade on it. And he doesn't even have a good follow-up with the hero power. It's just a little 1/1. Ant, of course, doesn't exactly have the best hand possible to follow up to turn 9 until he picks up the Medivh Valet. Is that going to change anything here?
Ooh, that does allow a more effective trade into the Hydrologist. Previously, Astrogation attacked into the Babbling Book, didn't want to leave possibly any minion in play to connect with his face, because he needs as much time as he can get. The Valet means that the
well, it means he can keep his
take it down. Right, he can attack the Bitterhead Hydra in here, and now Valet can clear the way through the Stegodon.
Excuse me.
And I believe he'll still be clear from Consecration potential here. Astrogation kind of pinching his cheeks right now to kind of stay frosty because he recognizes he is in a tough spot. And a counterspell also shuts down possibilities from doing anything kind of janky to his board here.
Yeah, that's just so much pressure from Ant here.
But he's not dead. If he plays either of his taunts, he should at least be able to outlive the next turn. But it's all about the follow-up turns here from Astrogation. He plays Murloc Tidecaller first, test for Mirror Entity.
And Curator will find him a Megasaur and then another Murloc. Bluegill's interesting because it can potentially combine with Megasaur to take down even a large minion.
Oh.
Oh, a Fireball.
Is that lethal?
I believe that is lethal. Yeah, that's
perfect damage. Whew, wow, so Ant was able to turn the corner here. Secret Mage gets a very crucial win, because again, I thought Murloc Paladin was a heavy favorite. Data kind of backs it up too. It's like 6-4. And Ant is able to sneak another victory, but that's why you can't sleep on the Secret Mage, even if it has a slow start. Ant very wisely has planned out his turns and recognized that he is counting for one power swing. That's what those Tempo Mages are looking for.
Yeah, that game was really a lot about the glyphs into the secrets, which was able to allow him to power out those crystal runners despite not really having a particularly secret-heavy draw himself. It also really threw a wrench in Astrogation's game plan. He wasn't really able to effectively use a lot of his powerful creature buffs. If he played the Blessing of Kings and those happened to be something which stopped it, and it would have been a counterspell, he wasn't really able to take those swing turns because of the threat of those secrets.
Do you think there's any possible way for Astrogation to kind of hold serve in a sense that he played just as slow as Ant, so that way he had better opportunities against Secret? Or do you think that's too optimistic and that's just not really a good way to play the matchup?
I don't really think his deck is capable of those longer games. I think that we saw there, as the game went longer, things like Firelance Portal, things like Yogg Saron, these are giving Ant, these big swings later in the game. And many of Astrogation's strongest swing cards are things like those Spike Ridge Steed, the Blessing of Kings, which are just stopped by counterspell.
All right, well, let's go ahead and look into game number 4 here. Ant versus Astrogation. If Ant takes this game, he is going to Shanghai, China. He is going to turn to his Murloc Paladin, and Astrogation has lost 2 in a row here. There are a couple of subtle differences within these decks. We mentioned one of them, of course, is that the Consecration and the Rallying Blades, which means that Astrogation's playing 1 less Consecration. He only has 1 of them, and he only has 1 Cold Light Seer. I don't know if anything else immediately stands out here. But taking a look at the opening hands, Ant's able to get onto the board quickly, and Astrogation missed his 1-mana minion, so he's already a little bit in trouble here.
Yeah, and the Tidecaller can really run over an opponent who has a relatively slow draw. The ability to even just play Rockpool Hunter on the Tidecaller means that any of the 2-drops Astrogation can potentially play would just get eaten and leave the Tidecaller alive. We even see that there's the Cold Light Oracle, or rather Cold Light Seer, in Ant's hand that can buff it as well. So, any play that Astrogation makes here has the potential to just go really poorly for him.
That's right, and because Astrogation is trying to cut down the amount of times he can lose on board, if his opponent plays that Rockpool Hunter, or the Rockpool Hunter himself, then his will die. But if he doesn't, then the Rockpool Hunter can stay alive.
Yeah, and now because the Rockpool Hunter is a 2/3 here, the threat of just 1 Murloc coming down, unless it is a Murloc that buffs the Tidecaller, means that it's actually going to stay alive. But Ant recognizing that, chooses to get a redemption from his Hydrologist, and this means that no matter what Astrogation attacks, he's going to have multiple Murlocs in play for his Cold Light Seer next turn if he chooses to play it.
Still a little bit awkward trying to see what secret it is. We know that it is redemption. And I guess the good news for Astrogation is that he's got ways to follow this up.
It's true.
But it's a little awkward, because if you try to play the removal game, you're going to go off curve, and perhaps the Stonehill Defender is what you're looking for, but you're very afraid of that Murloc War Leader.
I think that if you're an Astrogation seat, you consider the fact that if Ant had War Leader, there's a very good chance that he would have just coined out War Leader last turn rather than playing the Hydrologist into Redemption, because he would have been able to kill your minion and keep his minion alive.
Yeah.
So I think that you're not really worried about there already being a War Leader in Ant's hand.
Okay, well, Word Confirmed Bloom-Bristle can definitely turn the tides if he's able to stick onto the board with Blessing of Kings and plays the Cold Light Seer, and that should allow him to push past this Stonehill Defender very easily. And I guess these are the instances where Astrogation would really want a weapon of some sort.
And now the health buff on these is what's crucial. You know, the fact that it leaves Ant with multiple minions that can survive these attacks, but Astrogation has a buff of his own, and this will force potentially Ant to attack with both of his minions into this, but there's also a Megasaur waiting, and there's multiple buffs that can help him take out this Rockpool Hunter. None of them, though. Wow, that's actually a swing and a miss from the Adapt here for Ant. We would have loved to see +1/+1, +3 attack, or Poisonous, but none of these actually allow clean trades. He may even have to double trade or run the risk of this Murloc staying in play.
What about getting aggressive? It's like Wind Fury and just attack all face.
I was gonna say, unless you're getting really afraid of this this Murloc, you could just go ahead and just get all the damage in. He's gonna take health here, which sets up better for potential Spike Ridge Steed if that's his plan in a couple of turns.
Yeah, also makes some trades on the other side a little bit less good if they have War Leader plus Bluegill Warrior to help charge into it, or it plays around the Rallying Blade as a potential way to snipe those 2/3s. I just like the Wind Fury. It's cool, and then you have you Spike Ridge Steed Wind Fury them, but yeah, it's a little optimistic, of course. That's 2 turns down the line. Next turn is definitely reserved for Finja. Hydrologist comes down, a Noble Sacrifice, Getaway Kodo, Eye for an Eye. I think tempo is what really matters here as opposed to value.
Yep.
So Getaway Kodos and Eye for an Eye definitely seem to be on the lower end here. So I think Noble Sacrifice is what I'm leaning towards.
Getaway Kodo, interesting.
Chooses Getaway Kodo, so he thinks he can drag this game out.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Ant take the Redemption earlier, specifically because he was trying to play so strongly to protect his board. That's worked out very well for him. He was able to establish the Cold Light on 2 minions, and now this does set up a pretty good board protected by Wicker Flame, and potentially looking to play a value game with the Getaway Kodo later.
Okay. I mean, maybe that's what Astro feels like, because it's starting to go back and forth, and no one's really in the firm lead. Although Finja can change that a lot. The Flying Star has hit the board, and when he pulls out War Leaders, he means serious business. This is looking a little dicey for Astrogation.
Rallying Blade doesn't offer any particularly great options here. He can take that. He got the Megasaur with the Rallying Blade and potentially trade in to the Hydrologist here. But yeah, he could potentially try and protect his board with a Stonehill Defender and just hope there's absolutely no buff to actually get Finja through the 4 health taunt. But yeah, this is definitely a rough situation for Astrogation. Finja actually runs the risk of really swinging the board in Ant's favor next turn.
He's gonna think about every possible way to stabilize here, but and 6 mana, there's so many things that Ant can have. Ant could have Sunkeeper Terran. He could have the Spike Ridge Steed. He could have his own Blessing of Kings. It's gonna be really tough. Astrogation looking for some way for Hydrologist to maybe bail him out.
Noble Sacrifice is kind of interesting. You can make Finja only kill the defender, but it will still kill the defender. So
yeah, but it also protects the Stonehill. So.
All right, he's going with Getaway Kodos here, and I think we're probably just going to see a double trade, and he's just going to try and keep stacking Stonehills.
Yeah, he's especially when he picked Gravity Protector, it's clearly that he's going for a long-term value game. Has some synergy there. Spike Ridge Steed comes out on Finja, which is also problematic because that means Finja's going to survive and play and get multiple Murlocs out of the deck here. Okay, nothing too egregious. But still not a good position for Astrogation.
Yeah, now this buffed Finja, is really just running the risk for Astrogation of just continuing to eat his board and generate Murlocs for Ant. And looking at his hand, there's no real clear way to kill it.
I mean, maybe you just got to play this Protector and hope that it absorbs a lot of damage instead of for better Consecration.
It looks like it may just be Astrogation's best option. And you see, he's kind of looking a little bit despondent here.
This is tough. This is his tournament life. And Astrogation survived a very cutthroat field to get to this top 8, only to potentially lose to his friend and fellow SoCal resident, and Ant, which I guess, I mean, the game's not over yet, but it's still looking kind of dicey here because Finch is going to pull out more minions.
I mean,
he can get Spike Steed again.
Ant could play a second Steed here if he wants to. There's no silence effects in Astrogation's deck, so he could even play the Tidecaller into Steed, which would allow him to get buffs on the Tidecaller from the minions that come out from Finja. And that's exactly what's happening here. This is the biggest, buffest ninja I've ever seen coming in, taking out the Grime Sea Protector. And if there's a War Leader here, that's a War Leader. This game may just be over.
I think so. One War Leader comes out. A second War Leader has come out. And I think that is the beginning of the end. Ant is making his victory march to Shanghai.
Yeah, that's just an absolute Murloc army. Astrogation has nothing that can deal with it.
I mean, he can try to fish or something. The only way that he could normalize maybe was if he had a Sunkeeper Terran, but that means the War Leader still buffs everything.
You see frowny face there from Astrogation.
TT. And he's gonna try one more time to look at the Stonehill Defender, but I don't think anything saves him. And it looks like he's just gonna play out the final cards here, let Ant have the final moments here, but I'm pretty sure that Ant has just booked his ticket to Shanghai, China.
Yeah, there it is, the concession, and Ant will be moving on to the semifinals and to the Spring Championship. Look at that relief on his face, the excitement on his face. This is a player who came so close to the World Championship years ago.
That's right, 2014.
He nearly qualified through the America's Championship back in 2014. And now he will be going to Shanghai for another shot at a championship.
That's right, Brian. He's going to be joining Diego Diaz from Brazil, as well as Muzzy from the USA in Shanghai and represent the Americas. 3 years ago, he did the same in representing Americas, only to be taken down in the round of 16, being denied entry into BlizzCon. What's going to happen this year? It's going to be really exciting. Also, I'm pretty sure a lot of his friends are really happy for him. Ant also streams a lot to a lot of the smaller communities there, and he also is a writer on the Meta Snapshot. So if you guys maybe have even copied his decks subconsciously, not even sure that you were doing that, he may have also influenced how you have played Hearthstone. Very happy for the guy.
Yeah, he's he even had a recent top 8 performance at a DreamHack as well. So
that's right.
He's kind of flown under the radar as far as the really high-profile players, but he's been around the scene and a major element of the community for a long time.
That's right, and he also supports a lot of the local scene too. He always comes out to the firesides. He always helps out all the players. Always comes out to on his own dime. So it's really cool to see Ant be able to kind of stay involved in the scene. And now he is here for an interview as the third player to join us for Shanghai, China. Ant, what's up, man? What's going through your head right now?
Oh my God, I don't even know. How did this even happen? I just came to play Hearthstone. I don't know, man.
Came to play Hearthstone. Well, 3 years ago, you went to the America's Championship, and it's kind of been, a long journey right back here. So kind of describe the process of being able to come back, and now you're going to Shanghai.
Oh, it's like, just the grind is so intense, man. Like, you just go, day after day, like opens or like just grinding ladder, anything like that. And to finally see it pay off feels so good.
I got to ask too, the fact that you're going against Astrogation, a guy that you've met up so many times in person, and also another player from Southern California there. Was there anything a little bit more to that top 8 match that met the eye?
I mean, not really. Like, he's just one of my really good friends. So it kind of sucks that we had to play each other. But I mean, I guess either of us were really happy with either result. So I mean, I'm oh God. It sucks that we had to play each other, but I guess maybe it was a fitting end. I don't know.
Yeah, tough pill to swallow indeed. Brian, do you have anything to ask for Ant here?
I mean, you seem pretty excited, pretty emotional in this moment. What's really going through your mind? You're saying, a long road to get here, but how are you feeling right now?
I want to get up and hug people, a lot of people, like everybody in this building.
That's right. I saw that you posted on social media. Yeah, I saw that you posted on social media that you were having some victory dinner celebration at Buffalo Wild Wings. Are you going to do another big celebration and invite all your friends?
Oh, absolutely. Come on, man. You got to.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ann, for your time. Congratulations. You're going to Shanghai, man. Do you want anybody you want to thank for the journey that coming back from 2014 all the way to 2017?
I want to thank like Akamaker for helping with my decks. A lot of the decks were like Poi or like APX Void or like the Ballet. Kill All Day is like one of my good friends and practice partners. I want to thank the Nuke group, you know, everybody out there who like, you know, supports my stream or anything like that. And just all my friends in Hearthstone. And shout out to Nebbles.
All right, that just happened. Thanks very much, and congratulations, Ant. We'll see you in Shanghai. All right, guys. And as you can see, he's a very friendly guy, in fact. You know, one of my favorite people just to hang out with at events. I've been seeing him for many years. This is an immediate reaction. If you just tuned in, Ann has qualified for Shanghai, China, the third from the Americas, 2 from U.S., 1 from Brazil. Brian, what a great way to wrap up match number 3 here.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a great group already go to Shanghai, and one more will be joining them in a moment.
That's right. Quarterfinal 4 is about to start and get underway, so let's hand over to TJ and Annabelle. Stay in your seats, guys. Quarterfinal 4 starts right now.